crystal throne room of the Valkyrie Empire gleamed under three suns. Princess Hyeri stood at the far end, as she always did during court gatherings. Not at her father's side where her siblings stood, not even among the noble families who lined the hall. She stood alone in the shadows, where no one had to acknowledge her existence. Her brother Minho was demonstrating his abilities again. With barely a thought, he lifted a solid block of star metal that weighed more than 10 men. It floated across the room, rotating slowly as gasps of admiration filled the hall. Her sister Yunji followed, shattering a target dummy with a psychic blast that would have punched through a warship's hull. The court applauded. Emperor Timin smiled with pride. Hyeri watched quietly. She had tried the same demonstrations when she was younger. She had strained and focused until her head pounded and blood ran from her nose. The best she had ever managed was moving a small stone across a table. The court had laughed. Her father had looked away in disappointment. She learned quickly that it was better not to try at all than to fail in front of everyone. "The human delegation has arrived, Your Majesty," announced the court herald. Hyeri felt the shift in the room immediately. Humans. The Valkyrie had been debating whether to even allow them an audience. Humans were primitive creatures who built machines to compensate for their complete lack of psychic ability. They were considered barely civilized, a species that relied on crude tools because they had no real power of their own. The massive doors opened. 5 humans walked into the throne room. They wore simple gray uniforms that looked plain compared to the flowing robes of Valkyrie nobility. Leading them was a man who moved with quiet confidence despite every eye in the room judging him. He had dark hair, sharp eyes, and carried himself like someone who had faced danger and survived it. "I am Captain Doyon of Earth's Diplomatic Corps," the man said, bowing respectfully. "We come seeking alliance and mutual cooperation between our peoples." Several nobles snickered. Yunji whispered something to Minho that made him smile. Emperor Timin studied the humans with the expression one might give interesting insects. "An alliance," the Emperor said slowly. "Tell me, Captain Doyon, what could Earth possibly offer the Valkyrie Empire? You have no psychic abilities. Your technology is centuries behind ours. Your military could not stand against a single one of our battle minds." Doyon did not seem offended. "You're correct that we lack psychic powers, Your Majesty. But humanity has survived and prospered by learning to work together, by building what we need, and by solving problems through determination and creativity. We believe different strengths can complement each other. Your psychic abilities are remarkable. Our engineering and tactical approaches could add value to what you already possess." "Value," Minho said mockingly. "What you call engineering, we accomplish with thought alone. What you call tactics, we achieve with power. You are like children who've discovered sharp sticks and think yourselves warriors." The court laughed. Hyeri found herself leaning forward slightly. She had read about humans in the archives. Earth's history fascinated her in ways she never mentioned to anyone. They had fought countless wars, survived disasters, explored their solar system with machines and determination. They had no powers, yet they kept pushing forward. She had always wondered what that must be like, to succeed without any natural advantages at all. "Someone must accompany these humans during their stay," Emperor Timin said, sounding bored. "They will need a liaison to explain our ways and translate our expectations." "I volunteer," Minho said quickly. The other nobles looked eager as well. Hosting the humans would mean status, attention, possible favor from the Emperor. "No," Timin said flatly. He looked directly at Hyeri for the first time in months. "My daughter Hyeri will serve as their liaison. It is appropriate work for one of her limited abilities." The court's laughter was immediate and sharp. Hyeri felt her face burn, but she kept her expression neutral. She had learned not to show pain. That only encouraged them. "It will be an honor, Father," she said quietly. The negotiations lasted 3 days. Hayari accompanied the humans everywhere, and with each passing hour, she realized something strange. Captain Doyen actually listened when she spoke. His team treated her with respect, not mockery. They asked her questions about Valkyrie culture, about the Empire's history, about her understanding of galactic politics. They acted as though her knowledge mattered. On the third evening, she found Doyen on one of the palace balconies, looking up at the stars. "Your people will reject the Alliance proposal," Hayari said softly. "I wanted to warn you." Doyen nodded. "I suspected as much. We're not impressive enough for them. They think power is everything," Hayari said. "They can't imagine that anything else matters. And you?" Doyen asked, turning to look at her. "What do you think?" No one had asked her opinion on anything in years. Hayari hesitated, then spoke carefully. "I think my people have become dependent on their abilities. They solve everything the same way, with psychic force. They've forgotten how to think differently, how to adapt, how to consider that there might be other approaches to problems." Diane smiled. "That's a remarkably insightful observation, Princess. Insightful observations are useless when you can't move mountains with your mind," Hayari said bitterly. "At least, that's what everyone tells me." "I spent 10 years in special forces," Doyen said. "I met soldiers who could bench press twice their body weight, who had perfect aim, who never seemed to feel fear. Impressive people. But you know who the best operators were? The ones who could read a situation, who noticed details others missed, who understood the terrain and the enemy, and their own team's capabilities. Physical strength matters, but intelligence, observation, adaptability, those are what keep you alive." Hayari looked at him in surprise. "My people would say you're wrong. Your people have never fought an enemy they couldn't overpower," Doyen said quietly. "We have, repeatedly. We learn to value what actually wins battles, not what looks most impressive." The next day, Emperor Taemin rejected Earth's proposal. "Humanity is too primitive for alliance with the Valkyrie Empire. You rely on tools like savages. You have no real strength. This discussion is finished." Then he turned to Hayari. "You have failed to secure favorable terms or demonstrate any value in these negotiations. As punishment, you will oversee mining outpost Juno 7 on the frontier. Perhaps managing ore extraction is within your capabilities." The court buzzed with satisfaction. Frontier exile was reserved for the weakest, most useless Valkyrie. It was a place where the Empire sent those it wished to forget. "I have a request, Your Majesty," Doyen said suddenly. Every head turned toward him. "My team and I would like permission to accompany Princess Hayari to this outpost. We could use the experience of seeing Valkyrie operations firsthand. Consider it educational observation." Taemin looked surprised, then amused. "You wish to go into exile with my failure of a daughter? How fitting. Very well. Perhaps you primitives will learn something from each other." More laughter from the court. Hayari stared at Doyen in confusion. Why would he volunteer for this? What could he possibly gain? As they left the throne room together, Doyen leaned close and said quietly, "Every military officer learns to recognize strategic opportunities when everyone else sees disaster. That outpost is far from the Emperor's eyes. We can build something interesting there. Something new. If you're willing." For the first time in years, Hayari felt something other than resignation. It felt almost like hope. "I'm willing," she said. Mining outpost Juno 7 looked worse than Hayari had imagined. The station hung in orbit around a dead moon, its hull scarred with meteor impacts that no one had bothered to repair. The docking bay doors ground open with a sound that made her wince. Inside, the air tasted of recycled metal and resignation. The outpost commander was a middle-aged Valkyrie named Wanchik. His psychic abilities were weak enough that his forehead bore the exile mark, a small scar that identified him as defective to any who saw it. He looked at Hyeri with the flat expression of someone who expected nothing good from royal attention. "Princess," he said without enthusiasm, "we weren't informed you'd have company. Captain Doyen and his team volunteered to observe our operations," Hyeri said. She tried to sound authoritative, the way Yunji always did. It came out uncertain instead. Wanchik glanced at the humans with mild curiosity. "Humans? Never seen one in person before. Well, I'll show you around, but don't expect much. We extract ore, we ship it to the core worlds. We try not to die of boredom or equipment failure. That's about it." The tour confirmed everything Wanchik said. The mining equipment was decades old. The defensive systems barely functioned. The living quarters were cramped and poorly maintained. Worst of all was the atmosphere among the workers. 200 Valkyrie moved through the station like ghosts, doing their jobs with mechanical precision, but no energy, no hope, no life. "They've given up," Hyeri said quietly to Doyen as they walked through the common area. "All of them. Can you blame them?" Doyen replied. "They've been told their entire lives that they're failures, sent to a place specifically designed to be forgotten. The real question is whether they can be reminded that they're still valuable." That evening, Hyeri called a meeting of all personnel in the station's main bay. The workers assembled slowly, clearly expecting another pointless speech from yet another royal who didn't care about them. "I know what you think of me," Hyeri began. Her voice echoed in the large space. "You think I'm here as punishment. You're right. My father sent me here because I'm defective, just like all of you. I can barely move a pebble with my mind. The court has laughed at me my entire life." She saw some eyes focus on her with interest now. She had their attention. "But I've been learning something from these humans. They have no psychic abilities at all. Zero. And yet they've survived wars, disasters, and explorations that would have destroyed weaker species. They did it by working together, by building what they needed, by refusing to give up even when everyone told them they were inferior." Diane stepped forward. "Princess Hyeri has invited us to share some human approaches with you. We're not here to replace Valkyrie methods. We're here to add to them, to show you that there are many ways to be strong." Over the next weeks, the outpost transformed. Doyen's team taught basic engineering principles to anyone interested. A young Valkyrie named Jiwon, who worked in the reactor rooms, took to the lessons like he'd been starving for them. His psychic abilities were almost non-existent, but his mind understood machines in ways that impressed even the humans. On my homeworld, they told me I was useless because I couldn't lift objects with my thoughts, Jiwon said one evening as he worked alongside Doyen to reinforce a failing support structure. But I could always understand how things worked, how systems connected. Nobody cared about that. "We care," Doyen said simply. "That skill has saved human lives countless times. There's no such thing as a useless ability. Only abilities that haven't been needed yet." Hyeri found herself working harder than she ever had in the palace. She studied the station systems, learned the names and roles of every person aboard, and started organizing the workers into efficient teams. She discovered that she had a talent for coordination, for seeing how different skills could fit together to create something greater than the sum of its parts. One afternoon, she was helping Jiwon recalibrate a mining drone when Doyen found her. Her hands were covered in grease, her hair was tied back with a piece of wire, and she was arguing enthusiastically with Jiwon about optimal drilling patterns. "You look happy," Doyen observed. Hyeri paused, surprised. She was happy. For the first time in memory, she was doing something that mattered, something that people appreciated. No one here cared that she couldn't shatter mountains. They cared that she showed up, worked hard, and treated them like they had value. Is this what it's like for humans? She asked. Knowing your worth isn't tied to one specific ability? Mostly, Thuyen said. Though we have our own ways of making people feel worthless. Humans aren't perfect. But yes, we learned a long time ago that diverse skills make stronger communities. A doctor, an engineer, a farmer, a soldier. Each one is valuable in different ways. Hyeri nodded slowly. The Valkyrie used to understand that. I've read the old histories. Before we developed psychic abilities, we had scientists, builders, artists, explorers. Then the abilities emerged, and gradually, everything became about psychic power. Anyone who couldn't demonstrate strong abilities was deemed lesser. We simplified ourselves, made ourselves weaker by throwing away everyone who didn't fit one narrow definition of strength. You could change that, Doyen said. Start here. Show that there's another way. But changing things would require time they didn't have. 3 weeks after their arrival, the outpost long-range sensors picked up something alarming. Wanchik called Hyeri and Doyen to the control room, his face tense. We've got multiple contacts approaching from the frontier void, he said, pointing at the displays. Configuration doesn't match any known Valkyrie ships. Not pirates, either. Too organized. Too many of them. Doyen studied the sensor data with the focused intensity of a trained military officer. Biological ships. Moving in coordinated patterns. How far out? 2 days at current speed, Wanchik said. Should I send the priority alert to the core worlds? Do it, Hyeri said immediately. The response came 6 hours later. A brief message from a minor bureaucrat. Unconfirmed sensor data insufficient for fleet deployment. Continue monitoring. Report only if threat is verified. They don't believe us, Wanchik said flatly. Or more likely, they don't care. We're just defectives on the frontier. Not worth the cost of sending help. Hyeri felt cold anger building in her chest. Her father would let them all die rather than waste resources on the outpost. He'd sent her to specifically because it didn't matter. The workers around the control room looked frightened. They knew what this meant. They were alone. We're not defenseless, Doyen said. His voice cut through the rising panic like a blade. We have defensive weapons, don't we? Outdated point defense turrets, Wanchik said. Haven't been tested in years. Probably half of them don't even work. Then we fix them, Doyen said. We also have mining equipment that can be repurposed, cargo haulers that can be rigged with explosives, and 200 intelligent beings who are more capable than anyone gave them credit for. We have 2 days. Let's use them. Hyeri stood up straighter. He's right. Start organizing teams. G1, I need you to assess all our defensive systems and mining equipment. Wanchik, inventory everything that could potentially be used as a weapon. Everyone else, we're going to learn some human tactics. If they want to attack mining outpost Juno 7, they're going to learn what happens when you corner people who've been underestimated their entire lives. For the first time since arriving, she saw something other than resignation in their eyes. She saw determination. She saw the beginning of hope. And she saw something else that made her throat tight. They were looking at her like she was actually their leader, not just the royal who'd been dumped on them as punishment. The station became a hive of controlled activity. Doyen's team taught basic combat tactics. G1 got the defense turrets operational with repairs that impressed even the humans. Workers who'd spent years doing mindless mining work discovered they could learn, adapt, and prepare for battle. On the second day, the unknown ships entered visual range. The displays showed massive biological vessels, like enormous insects bred for war. There were dozens of them. Behind Hyeri, someone whispered a name in horror. Krell. The Krell Swarm. Stories from the Frontier. dismissed as legends by the core worlds. A hive mind species that conquered and consumed everything in its path. And they were here, approaching the outpost with clear hostile intent. "Stations, everyone," Hayari ordered, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Remember your training. We stand together or we fall alone." Beside her, Doyen checked his weapon and smiled. Time to show the galaxy what happens when humans and Volcari work together. This is going to be interesting. The first Krell ship opened fire, and the battle for Juno 7 began. The first impact shook the entire station. Hayari grabbed a console to steady herself as alarms screamed throughout Juno 7. The Krell ships moved closer, their biological hulls pulsing with sickly light. "Return fire," Wanshik ordered. The point defense turrets spat energy bolts toward the approaching vessels. Some hit their marks, scorching dark patches on the organic armor. More missed as the Krell ships twisted and dodged with unsettling fluid grace. Then everything changed. A wave of something invisible swept through the station. Hayari felt it pass through her like cold water, leaving her gasping. Around her, every Valkyrie worker suddenly cried out in shock and horror. Wanshik stumbled backward from his console, his face gone pale. Jiwan dropped to his knees, hands pressed to his temples. "What's happening?" Hayari demanded. "My abilities," Wanshik whispered. "They're gone. I can't feel anything. Can't move anything. It's like being blind and deaf at the same time." All around the control room, Volcari workers stood frozen in shock. Their psychic abilities, weak as they were, had been a constant presence in their minds since birth. Now there was nothing. Just silence. Just emptiness. The panic was immediate and absolute. Some workers simply shut down, unable to process the loss. Others began hyperventilating or sobbing. But Hayari felt exactly the same as she always had. And the humans continued working as though nothing had happened. "Psychic jamming field," Doyen said, studying his scanner. "Clever. The Krell emit a frequency that blocks psychic abilities. That's how they've been winning against the Valkyrie on the frontier. They take away your people's greatest weapon. We need to do something," Hayari said. They're all in shock. "Then you lead them," Doyen replied. "You're the only Valkyrie who isn't affected. You never had abilities to lose." Hayari looked around at the panicking workers. Her entire life, she'd been told her lack of ability made her useless. Now it was the only thing keeping her functional. The irony would have been funny if the situation wasn't so desperate. "Everyone listen to me," she shouted. A voice cut through the panic. "I know what you're feeling. I know the silence is terrifying. But you're still you. Your minds still work. Your hands still work. We're gonna get through this. We can't fight without our abilities," someone cried out. "The humans have been fighting their entire existence without any abilities at all," Hayari said. "And they're still here. We can learn. We can adapt. We have to." Another impact rocked the station. A Krell boarding pod latched onto the outer hull with a wet, organic sound. Then another. And another. They were coming inside. Doyen moved to Hayari's side. "We need to organize defensive positions at key corridors. Use the station's layout to funnel them into kill zones. Can your people handle weapons if they can't use psychic powers?" "They'll have to learn fast," Hayari said. She turned to the control room. "Jiwan, can you still work the systems?" Jaewon looked up, his face streaked with tears, but he nodded. "The computers still respond. I can seal sections, reroute power, open or close bulkheads. I can do this." "Good. Wanshik, gather everyone who can hold a weapon. Diane will show us where to position ourselves. Move quickly. We don't have much time." The transformation happened through necessity. The Valkyrie workers, stripped of the abilities they'd relied on, had two choices: collapse, or adapt. Slowly, then faster, they chose to adapt. They picked up the modified mining tools that Jiwon had turned into makeshift weapons. They took positions behind barricades that Doyen's team hastily constructed from cargo containers. The first Krell warriors breached through a sealed bulkhead. They were nightmares made flesh, insect-like creatures standing upright, with too many limbs and mandibles that dripped acid. They moved with perfect coordination, the hive mind controlling them as precisely as any Valkyrie might have moved objects with psychic power. "Wait for it," Doyen said calmly. "Let them get into the corridor. Don't fire until I give the word." Aeri crouched beside him behind a makeshift barricade. Her heart hammered in her chest. She'd never been in combat, never even imagined she would be. But there was no time for fear. Her people needed her. "Now," Doyen said. The corridor erupted in fire. Modified plasma cutters designed to slice through rock now carved through Krell warriors. One of Doyen's team triggered an explosive charge that brought down a section of ceiling, crushing 3 attackers. The Krell didn't retreat. They felt no fear, but the narrow corridor prevented them from using their numbers effectively. They had to come at the defenders in small groups, and in small groups, they could be stopped. "Fall back to secondary position," Doyen ordered after the first wave was repelled. "They'll adapt. We need to keep moving, keep them guessing." Over the next hours, the battle became a desperate dance. The humans taught the Valkyrie workers everything they could in the brief moments between attacks. How to move tactically, how to use cover, how to coordinate fire, how to think like soldiers instead of psychics. Aeri discovered she had instincts she never knew existed. She could read the flow of battle, could see where reinforcements were needed, could anticipate where the Krell would push next. Maybe it came from years of observing everything and everyone, of learning to notice details others missed. Whatever the reason, she found herself coordinating the defense with growing confidence. Jiwon became crucial to their survival. From the control room, he manipulated the station itself as a weapon. He sealed corridors to channel the Krell into ambushes. He vented sections to vacuum at critical moments. He rerouted power to keep weapons functional and life support running. His understanding of systems, the skill his people had dismissed as worthless, was keeping them alive. But the Krell kept coming. For every warrior they killed, 2 more pushed through. The boarding pods continued attaching to the hull. The defenders were being pushed back, section by section, toward the station's core. During a brief lull in the fighting, Aeri found Doyen checking on his team. One of his people, a quiet woman named Hana, had taken a wound to her leg but refused to leave her position. Another team member, a young man named Quan, was helping a group of Valkyrie workers set up a new defensive line. "We're holding," Doyen said, "but barely. We need to change the situation somehow, or they'll overwhelm us through pure numbers." "I have an idea." Jiwon's voice came through the CUM system. "It's risky, but it might work. The Krell jamming field has to be generated from their largest ship. If we could send a strike team to take it out, even temporarily, the Valkyrie would get their abilities back." "How do we get to their ship?" Aeri asked. "One of the Krell boarding pods is still attached and intact. I can open it from our side, seal it from theirs. Small team could use it to reach their vessel. If they can disable the jammer for even a few minutes, we could coordinate a psychic strike that would cripple their fleet." Doyen nodded slowly. "It's suicide. Even if the team makes it to the jammer, getting back would be nearly impossible. Then we make sure it's worth it," Aeri said. "If we get those few minutes, we use them for everything they're worth." Every Valkyrie focuses their ability on the largest ships. All at once. No holding back. You're talking about psychic coordination on a level the Valkyrie have never attempted, Doyen said. They've never needed to cooperate that precisely. They've never had to before, Hyeri replied. I can coordinate them. Keeping track of multiple things at once is what I do. It's the only skill I have. Wanchik appeared, exhausted but determined. I'll lead the strike team to the jammer. I know Krell ship layouts from intelligence briefings. And frankly, I've been exiled once already. Might as well make it count. I'm going with you, Doyen said immediately. No, Hyeri said sharply. I need you here. The Valkyrie trust you. They'll listen to you when things get desperate. Wanchik is right. He should lead this. Take volunteers, people who understand the mission. The strike team assembled quickly. 5 Valkyrie workers and 2 of Doyen's people, including Quan, who volunteered despite Doyen's protests. They equipped themselves with whatever weapons they could carry and prepared to enter the Crow boarding pod. Before they left, Wanchik approached Hyeri. Princess, if this works, tell the Emperor something for me. Tell him the defectives he threw away saved his empire. When this works, Hyeri corrected, you'll tell him yourself. The strike team disappeared into the boarding pod. Jiwan sealed it behind them, then opened the far end. They were gone, heading into the heart of the Krell vessel. All personnel, Hyeri's voice rang through the station's comm system. Hold every position. Fight for every meter. The strike team is buying us time. Don't waste it. The Krell pushed harder, as though sensing the desperation of the defenders. The fighting became brutal and chaotic. Hyeri moved through the corridors, coordinating defense, helping where she could, refusing to let anyone give up. Then Doyen was beside her, pulling her behind cover as plasma fire scorched the wall where she'd been standing. A Krell warrior had gotten through the line, heading straight for her. Doyen put himself between them, firing precisely until the creature fell. But another warrior appeared behind the first. Its bladed limbs struck faster than Hyeri could track. Doyen cried out as the blade cut across his chest, sending him sprawling. No, Hyeri screamed. She grabbed Doyen's weapon and fired wildly. Somehow she hit the warrior. It staggered, and other defenders finished it off. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of constant vigilance, of repair work and preparation, of wondering when the Krell would return. 3 weeks of Hyeri sitting beside Doyen's medical bed, watching him fight for his life. The station's medical facilities were basic, designed for mining injuries, not combat wounds. The human medic Hana did what she could, but Doyen's injuries were severe. He drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes recognizing Hyeri, sometimes lost in fevered dreams where he called out warnings about enemies that weren't there. You need to rest, Jiwan said gently, finding Hyeri in the medical bay again during the night shift. You can't lead if you collapse from exhaustion. I can't leave him, Hyeri said. Her voice was raw from lack of sleep. He came here because of me. He stayed because he believed we could do something important. And now he might die because he stepped between me and that Krell warrior. He stepped between you and danger because that's who he is, Jiwan said. And you're still leading because that's who you are. He wouldn't want you to stop now. Jiwan was right, and Hyeri knew it. The outpost needed her. The Krell attacks had continued, though less intensely. They came in waves, testing the defenses, probing for weaknesses. Each attack was repelled, but the defenders were exhausted. They couldn't hold forever without relief. The relief came from an unexpected direction. A Valkyrie military fleet appeared at the edge of the system, 8 capital ships with full battle mine crews. Leading them was her brother, Prince Minho. Hyeri met him in the docking bay. He looked around at the scarred walls, the makeshift repairs, the exhausted defenders with their exile marks and worn expressions. His face showed confusion and something that might have been embarrassment. Sister, he said formally. The Empire has finally taken notice of the situation here. Your distress signals were ignored, but reports of your victory reached the core worlds. Father sent me to investigate. Investigate what? Hayari asked. She was too tired to be diplomatic. Whether the defective princess actually did something useful. Whether the reports of humans and Valkyrie fighting together were somehow mistaken. Minho flinched. The reports were difficult to believe. You held this station against a Krell siege for 3 weeks, with only 200 workers and a handful of humans, against a fleet that has destroyed a dozen Valkyrie military outposts. We held because we had to, Hayari said. No one was coming to save us, so we learned to save ourselves. Over the next days, Minho and his officers toured the outpost. They watched the defenders drill with both psychic abilities and physical weapons. They studied the modifications G1 had made to the station systems. They interviewed workers who spoke passionately about tactics and engineering, about working in teams and adapting to challenges. One evening, Minho found Hayari in the observation deck, staring out at the stars. The Krell fleet hung at the edge of sensor range, watching and waiting. I don't understand how you did this, Minho admitted. These people had no military training, no combat experience, weak psychic abilities. By every standard we use to measure Valkyrie, they should have failed. That's the problem with our standards, Hayari said. We only measure one thing: psychic power. We've forgotten that intelligence, creativity, determination, cooperation, these things matter too. Maybe more than raw power. The Krell jamming technology changes everything, Minho said quietly. Every battle doctrine we have assumes psychic superiority. But if they can take that away, if they can reduce our forces to the level of the humans, we're vulnerable. The entire Empire is vulnerable. Not if we learn what the humans already know, Hayari replied. How to fight without relying on a single advantage. How to use tactics and strategy. How to work together instead of depending on individual power. Minho was silent for a long moment. Father will never accept this. The court will resist any change. They believe Valkyrie supremacy is based on psychic ability. Admitting we need to learn from humans would undermine everything they think makes us superior. Then they'll lead the Empire to destruction, Hayari said flatly. The Krell aren't going to stop. And if we can't adapt, we'll fall. It's that simple. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent message from G1. Princess, Captain Doyen is awake, and he's asking for you. Hayari ran to the medical bay. Doyen was sitting up in bed, looking pale and weak but alive. His eyes focused on her as she entered, and he smiled slightly. I hear I missed a few weeks, he said. Hayari felt tears running down her face and didn't care who saw. You almost died, you stubborn human. What were you thinking, stepping in front of that warrior? I was thinking that you're too valuable to lose, Doyen said simply. And I was right. Look what you accomplished while I was taking a nap. Over the following days, Doyen recovered slowly. Hayari brought him reports of everything happening on the station and beyond. The story of Juno 7's defense was spreading across the frontier. Other outposts, other exiled Valkyrie were hearing about the useless princess and the defective workers who held against impossible odds. Meanwhile, Minho spent time with Doyen, asking questions about human military history and tactics. The prince was beginning to understand what his sister already knew. Strength came in many forms, and the Valkyrie had narrowed their definitions so much that they'd weakened themselves. Then G1 made a discovery that changed everything. He'd been analyzing the Krell jamming technology from the damaged ships. The equipment was sophisticated, but it had a weakness. With the right frequency pulse, it could be disrupted for about 30 seconds. Not long, but potentially enough. If we can hit them with a coordinated psychic strike during that window, G1 explained to the assembled command staff, We could cripple their entire fleet. But it requires perfect timing. Every Valkyrie would need to strike in unison, focusing on specific targets. That level of coordination has never been attempted, Minho said. Our battle minds work independently. They're powerful, but they don't cooperate that precisely. Hayari coordinated 200 workers during the first battle, Diane said. He was still weak, but his mind was sharp. She can do it again with a larger group. That's her gift. Not raw power, but the ability to see the whole picture and bring everyone together. It's risky, Minho said. If the timing is off, if the coordination fails, we'll have exposed our forces for nothing. Everything worth doing is risky, Hayari said. The question is whether we trust each other enough to try. The decision was made to attempt the strategy. Minho's fleet would engage the Krull, drawing them into battle. At the critical moment, G1 would trigger the jammer disruption. Hayari would coordinate every Valkyrie mind in the combined forces, including Minho's powerful battle minds, for one unified strike. The night before the battle, Hayari found herself alone with Doyoung in the observation deck. He was moving carefully, still recovering, but he'd insisted on being there. You've changed, Doyoung said. You're not the uncertain princess I met in the palace anymore. I had a good teacher, Hayari replied. You showed me that I didn't need to be what everyone expected. I just needed to be myself and find where that was valuable. The Valkyrie Empire is going to change because of you, Doyoung said. Whether your father wants it to or not. This battle will prove that cooperation is stronger than individual power. That diversity of skills makes resilience. All the things you people forgot. I'm scared, Hayari admitted. What if I fail? What if I can't coordinate everyone properly? People will die because of my mistakes. Leaders always carry that weight, Doyoung said. But you won't be alone. That's the whole point. You'll have 200 workers who trust you, battle minds who've seen what you can do, and your brother who's finally starting to understand. And you'll have me for whatever that's worth. It's worth everything, Hayari said quietly. The battle began at dawn station time. The Krull fleet moved in, confident after weeks of siege. They'd worn down the defenders, and now they came to finish the job. But this time, they faced not just an outpost, but a full military fleet as well. Minho's battle minds engaged with devastating power, but the Krull jammer activated immediately. The psychic abilities vanished, and the Valkyrie military forces faltered, just as the workers had weeks before. They'd never fought without their powers. Panic rippled through the fleet. All forces, this is Princess Hayari. Her voice rang through every comm channel. I know you've lost your abilities. I know it's terrifying. But you're still warriors. You still have weapons, training, and intelligence. Fight like the humans taught us. Trust your ships, your weapons, and each other. We hold the line together. The Valkyrie forces steadied. They'd seen the reports, heard the stories. If the defectives could fight without powers, so could they. The battle continued with conventional weapons, with ship maneuvers and tactical positioning. The humans integrated perfectly with the Valkyrie crews, teaching and guiding as they went. Jammer disruption ready, G1 reported. Deploying in 5 seconds. All Valkyrie forces, focus on these targets. Harry transmitted the coordinates of the largest Krull ships. When your abilities return, strike together. Follow my timing exactly. 3, 2, 1, now. She felt the psychic abilities surge back to life across the entire fleet. Hundreds of battle minds. The Imperial Palace looked exactly as Hayari remembered it. Crystal spires reaching toward 3 suns. Polished floors reflecting endless light. Courtiers moving through halls with the casual arrogance of those who'd never questioned their superiority. Nothing had changed here. Everything had changed with her. She walked through the throne room doors with Doyoung at her side. He still moved carefully, his injuries not fully healed, but he'd insisted on being there. Minho walked on her other side, and behind them came a delegation from Juno 7. Jiwon, Wanchik, and a dozen workers who'd fought in the siege. They wore their exile marks openly, no longer symbols of shame but badges of survival. Emperor Taemin sat on his throne, looking older than Hyeri remembered. Her sister Yoonji stood at his right hand, her expression cold and dismissive as always. The court filled the hall, hundreds of nobles and officials who'd come to witness what would surely be entertainment. The useless princess returning from exile to be judged. "Hyeri," the emperor said. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "You were sent to mining outpost Juno 7 as punishment for your failures. Yet you return having engaged in unauthorized military action, having forged alliances without permission, and having spread dangerous ideas about cooperation with humans. Explain yourself." The old Harry would have apologized, would have bowed her head and accepted whatever judgment came. The new Harry stood straight and met her father's eyes without flinching. "I returned because the Empire needs to hear the truth," she said clearly. "The Krell swarm is an existential threat. They have technology that neutralizes psychic abilities. Every battle doctrine, every military strategy, every assumption about Valkyrie superiority becomes worthless when they activate their jamming fields. The frontier is falling because we've forgotten how to fight without our powers." "Ridiculous," Yoonji said sharply. "Our military forces are the strongest in the galaxy. A few defeats on the frontier mean nothing. Tell that to the 12 outposts that have been completely destroyed," Minho said quietly. "Tell that to the thousands of Valkyrie who died because they panicked when their abilities vanished. I've seen the intelligence reports. The Krell are coming, and we're not ready for them." Murmurs rippled through the court. Minho was respected, powerful, expected to one day inherit the throne. His words carried weight that Hyeri's never could. "And what solution does my exiled daughter propose?" Taenin asked sarcastically. "Should we abandon the psychic abilities that make us superior? Become like the humans, dependent on crude tools?" "No," Hyeri said. "We should become better than we are. We should value all forms of intelligence, not just psychic power. We should teach tactics and engineering alongside psychic development. We should form mixed units with humans who can teach us to fight without relying on a single advantage. We should stop exiling everyone with weak abilities and recognize that different skills create strength, not weakness." "You're describing the end of Valkyrie civilization," Unji said. "We've built our entire society on psychic excellence. Admitting that it's not enough is admitting that we're not superior after all." "We're not superior," Hyeri said bluntly. The court gasped. No one spoke such heresy in the Imperial Palace. "We have one exceptional ability, but we've let that single advantage blind us to our weaknesses. The humans have no psychic powers at all, yet they've survived wars, disasters, and challenges that would have destroyed us. Because they learned to adapt, to cooperate, to value every kind of strength." Doyan stepped forward. "With respect, Emperor Taemin, I've watched your daughter coordinate hundreds of minds in perfect unison, something your most powerful battle minds have never achieved. I've watched workers you deem defective defend a station against impossible odds. I've seen Valkyrie and humans working together create something neither could accomplish alone. The question isn't whether humanity has something to teach the Valkyrie. The question is whether you're wise enough to learn." The silence in the throne room was absolute. No one, certainly no human, had ever spoken to the Emperor with such directness. Taemin's face darkened with anger. "You forget your place, Captain Doyan. I could have you executed for such insolence." "You could," Doyan agreed calmly. "But that would be choosing pride over survival. And I don't believe you're that foolish, despite the evidence." Minho made a strangled sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. Even Hyeri was shocked by Diane's boldness. But she realized he was doing it deliberately, forcing the court to confront their assumptions, refusing to play by their rules. "I've reviewed all the reports from Juno 7, Minho said, stepping into the tense silence. "I've spoken with the workers, examined the tactics, studied the battle recordings. Father, what Hyeri accomplished should be impossible by our standards. But it happened. And more importantly, it's the only approach that's actually working against the Crow. Every traditional military force we've sent has been defeated. But a mixed force using human tactics, valuing cooperation over individual power, the force won decisively." "You support this madness?" Taman demanded. "You, who have always been the perfect example of Valkyrie excellence." "I support survival," Minho said. "And I've learned something from my sister that I should have understood years ago. Being powerful and being wise aren't the same thing. I have more psychic ability than anyone in this room. But Hyeri has something I lack. The ability to see people clearly, to understand what they need, to bring them together. That's a kind of power too. Maybe a more important kind." Yunji stepped forward, her expression furious. "This is betrayal. You're both suggesting we rebuild our entire civilization based on the opinions of exiles and aliens. The court will never accept it." "The court doesn't have a choice," said a new voice. Wanchik stepped forward from the delegation, his exile mark visible for all to see. "Because the frontier is where the Krell are attacking. And the frontier is defended by people like us. Exiles, defectives, the ones you threw away. We're the ones standing between the Krell and the core worlds. We're the ones dying to protect an empire that told us we were worthless." Other workers from Juno 7 moved forward to stand with him. Jiwan spoke next. "I spent my whole life being told my technical skills didn't matter because my psychic abilities were weak. Then humans showed me that understanding systems, building solutions, working with my hands, these things have value. Real value. Juno 7 survived because of those skills. How many more like me are scattered across the empire, wasting potential because we don't fit your narrow definition of worth?" The court was buzzing now, nobles arguing among themselves. Some looked outraged. Others looked thoughtful. The certainty that had always defined Valkyrie superiority was cracking. Emperor Taman sat silently for a long moment, studying his daughter. Finally, he spoke. "You've embarrassed this family, Hyeri. You've challenged everything the Valkyrie stand for. You've allied with humans and elevated defectives. You've questioned the foundations of our civilization." Hyeri felt her heart sink. Despite everything, despite the victories and the proof, her father was going to reject it all. "And yet," Taman continued, "you've also saved an outpost, defeated a superior enemy force, and demonstrated abilities I never knew you possessed. Minho, what would you recommend?" Minho looked at his father in surprise, then glanced at Hyeri. "I recommend we establish a new military academy on the frontier. Mixed instruction of Valkyrie and humans. Teaching both psychic techniques and what Captain Doyon calls tactical warfare. Hyeri should lead it. She's earned that right." "No," Hyeri said. Everyone turned to stare at her. "I don't want to lead just an academy. I want to lead the entire frontier defense. I want authority to reorganize forces, to recall exiled Valkyrie, to form integrated units with humans. I want the power to actually change things, not just run a small training program that the core worlds can ignore." "You're asking for military command over the entire frontier?" Yunji said incredulously. "You, who couldn't move a pebble a month ago." "I'm the one who held Juno 7, Hyeri said quietly. "I'm the one who coordinated the battle that destroyed the Krell fleet. I'm the one who actually understands what we're facing. So yes, that's what I'm asking for. Emperor Timon studied his daughter for what felt like an eternity. Then he surprised everyone by standing and walking down from his throne. He approached Hyeri and looked at her closely, really seeing her for perhaps the first time in years. "You're not the child I sent away," he said quietly. That girl was uncertain, apologetic, desperate for approval. "You've become someone else entirely." "I've become myself," Hyeri said. "Without the weight of your disappointment, without the constant comparisons to Minho and Yoonji, I discovered who I actually was. Turns out, I'm pretty good at what I do, when people let me do it." A small smile crossed Timon's face. "Very well. You'll have your command. Frontier defense is yours to organize as you see fit. Prove that these ideas work on a larger scale. Prove that cooperation is stronger than power. But understand this, if you fail, it won't just be your reputation that suffers. It will be the Empire's survival." "I understand," Hyeri said, "and I won't fail." The formal ceremony followed. Hyeri was given command authority, resources, and most importantly, the Emperor's public endorsement. The court might grumble,